All right, so we've got our last learning objective here for Chapter 5. So we've learned a lot of stuff, and again, this is nothing terribly exciting. It's a lot of calculations, but the plus side of that is that it's always pretty straightforward, right? So I can learn how to do the calculations, and that makes things like the homework assignment, generally speaking, a little bit easier, right? There's a little bit less conceptual information in this little section of the course than, say, in supply and demand. Okay, so learning objective 8, we're going to put all of this price level information together to define and calculate inflation, which is an important metric that we use in macroeconomics. So the way that we summarize our changes in the cost of living is with a term we call inflation. So inflation is just the general increase in prices or cost of living. So over time, things get more expensive. We call that phenomenon inflation. So the inflation rate is simply the percentage change in the price level. So that's pretty easy, right? So however you've given me the price level information, I can go ahead and calculate the inflation rate. So here we've got 2019 and 2020. I know the CPI in each example, and so I can go ahead and calculate the inflation rate. So inflation rate is equal to the percent change in the price level. So maybe just a brief primer, right? So the percent change, so the way I calculate this is I take the new value minus the old value divided by the old value. And then I'll multiply that by 100 so that we get a nice number like in percentage, right? So rather than 0.01, I'll get 1 for 1%. So the inflation rate, the new value is 258. The old value was 255.7 divided by the old value, and I multiply by 100. So what do we get for the inflation rate? And I get about 0.8995%. So that's about 1%, right? So if it's equal to 1, it's 1% inflation, so about 0.9%. So the cost of living was increased by about 1% between 2019 and 2020. So not a huge increase. All right, so what I'd like you to do to get some practice calculating the inflation rate. And so by the way, there's a couple questions on the homework that ask you to calculate the percentage change or percent growth in either GDP or the price level. And so you can use this basic framework to make those calculations. So to practice this, I want you to go back to the minimum wage example here, this CPI example, where I gave you the CPI in all of these various years. And just go ahead and calculate the inflation rate between these consecutive years and kind of look and see when was inflation the highest, in what decade was it the highest. So we can do, let's take 1950 to 1970. Let's calculate the inflation rate between those years. So inflation from 1950 to 1970 is 39 minus 24, the new price level minus the old, divided by 24 times 100. So 15 over 24. So that's a 62.5% change. So that sounds pretty big, right? Now that's over a course of 10 years. So if I wanted to get this per year, that would be 6.25% per year. Right? So the average inflation rate from 1950 to 1970 was 6.25% per year. So the cost of living was increasing relatively quickly over that 20-year period. So you can go and take the other decades here. And, oh, sorry, you know what? I was a little bit high there. This is divided by 20. Sorry. So we went 20 years between 1950 and 1970. So that is actually half of that, 3.125. Per year. So not a huge increase, but certainly more than what that you're accustomed to here, right? So on average, the cost of living went up by about 3% per year in the 20 years from 1950 to 1970. So in the next groups, I have them all broken down by decades, so you would divide by 10 on the bottom. So give it a shot and try to decide which decade or which period of time that I've listed here had the highest inflation rate per year, and see what you get. And you can check. I'll put that in with my minimum wage calculations, and you can see when inflation was the highest. And then if you can do that, you should be all set to complete all the questions on homework 5.